Far too many cases of sex trafficking go unreported. But as my colleagues at the GBH News Center for Investigative Reporting have been uncovering in an ongoing series, cases of male victims are especially likely to fly under the radar. Their reporting is called Unseen, the boy victims of the sex trade, and the latest installment dives into one of the apps predators use to find and exploit underage boys. Grindr refers to itself as the world's largest social networking app for the LGBTQ community, but as my colleagues report, it's also, quote, teeming with underage gay, bisexual, and questioning boys who can easily lie about their age to gain access to the service. I'm joined now by two who did, German Chavez and Chris Bates, trafficking survivors who were both featured in the report, and of course senior investigative reporter Jenifer McKim, who's been collaborating with Phillip Martin on this really important series. All three of you, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it. Jen, can I start with you? I just want to take a step back and then we'll dig into the third installment. How is it that so many of these crimes go unreported and so many of these young male survivors go unsupported?
Thanks, Jim, so much for having us here and to talk about this really important topic that we have been looking at for a while in this ongoing series, Unseen, the boy victims of the sex trade. And what we've learned is that too often these cases go unreported, one, because the victims don't tell their stories, either because of shame or stigma or fear, and also because we as a society often don't see young men as victims at all.
But it's when they do report it, when they do have the courage to come forward, based on your reporting, there's not a hell of a lot of support for these young men and boys, correct?
That's true, but there's very little out there to help young people. And a lot of what we found is that a lot of young men who end up in the sex trade are doing what you call survival sex because they don't have help in their communities from their families and therefore are forced to sell themselves.
German, is that why you went on Grindr when you were just 13 years old?
Yeah, so when I went on Grindr, also Sue, hi, thank you for having me. So to answer your question, when I went on Grindr, like my first initial thoughts as a minor was to find people like me, because I always used to have people say to me, "Oh, find your people." So I would try to find my community and everything, but it then became I got the bad perspective of it, what I thought community meant at the time. And I thought that it was just all about sex as a minor. And then as I grew up, I started realizing that it was my survival skill also to feed myself or to take care of myself whenever I needed money. I would go to it, you know?
Understood. Chris, does that story that German tells sound familiar to you?
Yeah, absolutely. It does sound familiar. I grew up in a rural community in Connecticut, and Grindr was just so easy to access. I just checked off a box that I was over the age of 18. And when I was able to go on Grindr, I was seeking the same thing. I was trying to find my people. I didn't feel like I belonged. I felt like an outcast in my community. And then, really that's where I learned survival sex is through that app.
Chris, staying with you for a second, there were a lot of painful things in Jen and Phillip's reporting, but one of the most painful things, and I heard this, it was a common thread, not just through the two of you, but others, that you felt like what happened to you was your fault, that you were the bad person in this abuse. What caused you, what was the moment where you realized how wrong you were and that you were the victim, the survivor of this, not the bad actor?
I think that for me, what was guilt tripping for me was more that I was the one that downloaded the app. I was the one that, made the profile. I was the one that so as I got older, I felt like because I made the initial acts, as a minor, I felt like it was always my fault. And as I started to grow up, I kept like putting myself in a box where it's like, well, like you can't act if you don't make a decision. So like those were my actions. But at the same time, I realized that like also to the abusement of these men taking advantage of the fact that as a minor, I was so vulnerable. I've learned that it's not my fault at the same time too.
Chris, how did you learn it was not your fault?
Yeah, so I kind of feel like the same way. I didn't really know kind of anything about disposable income. I grew up in a single family home where my mom struggled. And so in order to get a pair of sneakers, it was like a whole day at Eblin's, right? And it was like a fight there and a fight coming back from Eblin's. So really, I really thought that I was taking advantage of these guys when they were purchasing access to my body. It wasn't until like probably 23 is when I started recognizing that that I wanted to do something. I was able to access government assistance, get secure and stable housing, and I wanted to get involved in my community. That's where I started volunteering at a local homelessness shelter. And from there, I went to a human trafficking training. And really, that's where I learned that there was a name to what I had experienced. And that was sex trafficking and exploitation, which is the exchange of money for needs.
Jen, does the app bear no legal responsibility to at least try to keep underage people off the damn site?
So this site, first of all, Grindr is not alone. There are a lot of sites with minors on them, but this one is particularly concerning because it does attract particularly vulnerable gay and bisexual kids.
Yeah.
They basically say they restrict restrict the website, the app to people who are 18 and older, but basically do nothing to verify identities, and the law protects them.
Yeah, what I think would be useful for a second, starting with you, Chris, in our final minute or two, I know you've become an advocate and a powerful voice on this. Chris, what do you say to a kid the same age you were, who's confused, thinks, again, that he is not the problem? What's your message to them?
Wow, I think that's a great question. And I think of myself as a young person when you ask me that question. I really think about how the situation in my broken, dysfunctional family made me feel. I was already scared. So reaching out for help. I was really afraid of the unknowingness, and I was told, what happens in this house stays in this house. So what I would tell that young person is really try to reach out for supports, and maybe the time that you reach out, it may not be the most helpful person, but keep trying. And if you're seeking positivity, you'll end up getting it. There are people that are able to help you in these situations, and really stay off these apps.
German, I only have a few seconds left. What do you say to that young boy watching?
Not only to the young boys, but to the trans community, to the young trans girls and boys that are out there too. I would say, find your people, but don't find your people on these apps. Find them where it comes to community things. Like, there's organizations out there that can be easy to access. Even if you're in school, talk to your counselors, create a GSA. I tell my drag children sometimes is, if you don't have a community, sometimes you can be the advocate to create your own community and say, we're here, we're queer, and let's talk about it,
I think I speak for a lot of people, German and Chris, when I tell you that you are making an important impact on the lives of lots and lots of people because of your courage, and I thank you on their behalf. Jen, you and Phillip have done fabulous work, and I can't wait for the next installment. All three of you, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.